In the lush, green village of Ojapani near Calabar, lived a little girl named Esther. She had a life filled with love, especially from her parents, until tragedy struck when she was only 8 years old. Her parents, who were on their way back from the market, died in a horrific motor accident. Esther's life turned upside down in an instant. She was left with her aged grandmother, Mama Ikit, who took her in, becoming her sole guardian and protector. Mama Ikit was a wise, gentle woman who knew the ways of the village and its rich culture. She was a pillar in the community, often seen in her simple wrapper and headscarf, weaving baskets and telling stories of their ancestors to the village children. She taught Esther how to draw water from the river, pound yam with a mortar and pestle, and sing the traditional Efik songs during festivals. Together, they would visit the village square, where elders gathered under the giant iroko tree to discuss matters of the day, from farming to family. Life was simple but hard. They lived in a thatched mud house, and every morning, Esther would rise before the roosters crowed to fetch firewood from the nearby forest. Her days were filled with farm work, helping grandma in the fields, and listening to folk tales about the gods and spirits that guarded their land. Yet, despite the hardships, Esther found joy in her grandmother's stories, the chirping of birds, and the gentle rustle of palm trees swaying in the breeze. Esther was bright, and the elders often marveled at her intelligence. Even in the village school, she was always at the top of her class, reading and writing in a way that made her teachers proud. Mama Ikit, despite her age and the challenges of raising her granddaughter alone, always encouraged her to dream beyond the village. She would often say, "My daughter, the world is bigger than Ojapani, and I know you will make us proud one day." With her grandmother's encouragement, Esther continued to excel in her studies. Her diligence paid off when she received admission to study medicine and surgery at the prestigious University of Calabar. It was a moment of great pride for the whole village, as it wasn't every day that one of their own went to university. They held a special celebration in the village square, with music, dancing, and a feast of roasted fish and pounded yam. Mama Ikit shed tears of joy as she blessed Esther, praying for her success. However, life at the university was much different from the serene village life Esther had known. She found herself surrounded by new influences and struggles, trying to balance the pressure of her studies with the excitement of newfound freedom. It was during her second year at the university that Esther made a mistake that would change her life forever. She met a boy named David, who charmed her with sweet words and promises of love. Caught up in the thrill of it all, she made a reckless decision and ended up pregnant. When she realized her condition, fear engulfed her. She was terrified of her grandmother finding out, of the shame it would bring to her family and village. She couldn't go to a hospital for fear that the news would somehow reach Mama Ikit. In her desperation, she sought out a local herbalist who was known for offering secret remedies for unwanted pregnancies. The herbalist was unlicensed and used questionable methods. He prepared a concoction for Esther, promising that it would solve her problem. But the pain that followed was excruciating, and though she managed to terminate the pregnancy, she knew something was wrong. She suffered in silence, too ashamed to tell anyone what had happened, enduring waves of pain and fever that would come and go. She hid her suffering from her friends, her professors, and even from Mama Ikit, who believed her granddaughter was thriving in her studies. Unbeknownst to Esther, the damage caused by that dangerous concoction was far worse than she could imagine. The improper procedure had left lasting internal scars, creating complications that slowly but steadily led to the development of cancer in her body. For years, it grew within her, silently wreaking havoc. Yet, despite her suffering, Esther continued to excel in her studies, determined not to let her secret mistakes define her. She was awarded a scholarship by an NGO that supported underprivileged students and became one of the top students in her class. She dreamed of becoming a doctor, hoping to one day return to Ojapani to make her grandmother proud. As the years passed, Esther's health began to decline. She noticed the growing weakness, the constant fatigue, and the pains that never quite went away. But she ignored them, attributing it to the stress of her studies. By the time she finally went to the hospital, she received news that shattered her world. She had cancer, and it was advanced. The doctors told her she had unknowingly been living with it for years. When her grandmother learned of Esther's illness, she was devastated. The strong, joyful woman who had raised Esther alone suddenly looked fragile, her voice trembling as she prayed for her granddaughter's healing. Esther underwent chemotherapy, fighting bravely against the disease. But deep down, the weight of her secret ate away at her. She blamed herself for what had happened, for the decisions she had made out of fear and desperation. After months of treatment, the doctors delivered another crushing blow. Esther had only 3 months left to live. She sank into a deep depression, overwhelmed by the knowledge that her actions years ago had led to this moment. She felt trapped in her own sorrow, believing that her suffering was a punishment for her past. But Mama Ikit never gave up hope. She prayed daily, urging Esther to keep believing in God. Esther clung to a fragile thread of faith, even as her body grew weaker. One night, she had a dream where she walked through a field of sunflowers, and a gentle voice told her she was healed. When she woke up, she felt a brief sense of hope, believing that maybe a miracle had happened. But when she returned to the hospital for another test, the results showed that the cancer had spread even further. The last months of Esther's life were filled with bittersweet moments. She reconciled with her grandmother, finally telling her the truth about what had happened during her second year. Mama Ikit wept, but she held Esther close, assuring her that she was forgiven, that no one is without mistakes. Esther spent her remaining days in the village, surrounded by the sounds of the forest, the smell of the river, and the love of the grandmother who had never stopped praying for her. On a quiet night under the stars, with Mama Ikit holding her hand and singing the old songs of their ancestors, Esther took her last breath. She passed away in the same village where she had once played as a carefree child, where she had dreamed of a bright future, leaving behind the hope she once carried and the pain she could not escape. Esther's death left a void in the village, a deep sorrow that lingered in the hearts of those who had known her. Mama Ikit, devastated but strong, continued to pray each night, hoping that her granddaughter had found peace beyond the pain. Esther's story became a cautionary tale, whispered among the villagers, of dreams that were cut short, of the fragility of life, and the power of forgiveness. She was remembered not just for her brilliance and promise, but for the tragic mistakes that led her down a path from which she could not return. Her grave, marked by a simple stone beneath the shade of a palm tree, became a place of reflection for the villagers. They would visit it to remember the young woman who had faced so many battles, who had held on to faith even when hope seemed lost. And as they knelt beside her grave, they were reminded of the lessons her life taught. That life is fragile, that mistakes have consequences, and that even in our darkest moments, love and forgiveness endure. Esther's life may have ended in tragedy, but her memory lived on, a reminder of the power of choices and the unshakable strength of a grandmother's love.
Watch out for next episode.